Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the webinar series hosted by the East-West Center on imagining environmental futures in Southeast Asia. Today, we are discussing the film, the ethnographic film created for the Luang Prabang Film Festival called Mekong 2030. Now, we hope that most of you have watched this film already. We did give a link so that you could watch it. If you haven't, check it out afterwards because it's very interesting. It's actually a collection of 5 different films. And what we're going to do today, so we have a couple of the film directors with us. We have, not yet, we don't have Kulikar Sotho, but she will hopefully join us. And we have Anysay, Keola. The 2 directors are here with us, and we also have the 2 producers. We have Alex Curran-Cardarelli and Sean Chadwell with us here, and we are going to discuss the film. Now, we have a little bit of a hybrid format today because Anysay is going to have to run. He's only going to be here with us for the beginning of the session. So unfortunately, we won't be able to ask him any questions afterward, but we're going to talk to Anysay first, and Kulikar is on site filming at the moment. And so we're hoping that she's going to join in. If not, we'll just have a conversation among ourselves. So because Anysay is quite pressed for time, introduce myself. I'm Courtney Work. I'm an anthropologist. I'm at in the Ethnology department at the National Chengchi University. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Anysay Keola, and actually ask Anysay to introduce himself and to tell us just a little bit, Anysay, how did you come to be the person that you are making ethnographic films here for us?
Hello, good morning from Vientiane, from Laos. So the first question is how do I become a filmmaker? Right?
Who are you and how did you come here?
I fall in love with filmmaking when I study in Australia, and after that I pursue. I work for a couple of years after I graduate, and then I realized that I'm not meant for like what the 9-to-5 job. so I further chasing my dream career as a film director. So I continue to study film in Bangkok in Thailand, in Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. And after that, I come back home, make my first feature films in Laos, and it became this group of friends who helped me make this film happen. And we call ourselves Lao New Wave Cinema, which as a tribute to the French New Wave. And so after that, just keep on making movies, and then for a living, to be a filmmaker for a living, and then trying to build up the film industry here in Laos. So this project have come along from as an initiate from Luang Prabang Film Festival that they announced for the filmmakers, for all filmmakers to submit the idea and synopsis about this topic, about the Mekong 2030 topics, which I see it as another opportunity to make movies, to make films. Yeah. So that's why I am part of this finally, because I think the board, the committee liked the idea that I proposed. Yeah.
Nice. So this was not really just a singular journey. You have a collective of people that works together with you in the Laos New Wave Cinema. Nice.
Yeah. Like we need many helps. We need teamwork.
It's always a collective effort. So let me ask you, when you saw this call for the Mekong 2030 exhibition, why did you choose, right? Did you have this story of the Che brother already in mind? Was it already something you wanted to do, or did this come out of you in response to the call and specifically for this? Can you tell us a little bit about how this story came to be?
Yeah, sure. I need to do some homeworks, a lot of homeworks. Like it's not the idea that I already have. I have to find the inspirations for the piece. I did most of my jobs is a work for NGO, which already deals with topics, environmental, social, gender, many social issues that I have to make film about as a documentary or corporate video. So so when I see this project, I try to I try to not think the same as the client works that I've been doing. Like, don't want to make it like another documentary or another educational film. I want to find a perspective that how can it be a piece of entertained cinematic and also spark people to really to think about the issues. So I took that as a challenge and start to look for inspirations. And the Che idea, it's just come from a book that I read while gathering the idea for this film, and stumble upon an article about Che Guevara and his trip, his road trip, and suddenly like everything fall into pieces. Like as a I can write a story that have two layers. One is like a normal narrative story that anyone can understand, enjoy, and then I can have another layer where it can be a metaphoric or symbol where each characters, if we discuss further, or for those who uh like to see how is this story related to Mekong, like, so that question can spark more questions after, and then to think about it and to talk about it and discuss about it, like, yeah.
Okay, nice. So this is a story about set in the future, which is the theme for Mekong 2030. All of the stories, all of the films in the collection are set in the future, and the future that you have has this young man who's an enthusiast of Che, and as many young men are, but your setting is Laos in the future, afflicted by a terrible virus. Now I have to ask, was the coronavirus already here before you got this story, or were you just channeling the future here?
Yeah, we joke about it. It's a coincidence.
No, really.
Where,
oh my God.
yeah, like we COVID starts to be like a topic, or start like after we already wrap up the productions and post productions, and yeah, it kind of gave us a goosebump to the crew too, like the scene that we shot that the character have have to wear a mask, like because they're afraid of each other.
Yes.
And it turns out to be true. And then yeah, like we also joke in the crew, like, do you have superstitious future? Do I know the future? No, but I guess it's like it's something that likely to happen, and it happens.
Well, it is funny now that it's happened. We do see these pandemic stories have been cooking around us for a while. So they are sort of in the air. But let me then ask you, so you talk about both the narrative and the symbolic level. Let me ask you to just expand a little bit on what for you what were you trying to get us to see at the symbolic level? Let me just quickly, so we have the story is set in a time in Laos where we have a pandemic happening, and there's a family. The young man who loves Che comes home to find both his sister and his brother are harvesting the blood of their mother because their mother has particular antibodies, is very rare, that can combat this disease. So they're harvesting the mother's blood and selling it. So this is the basic narrative structure of the story for our audience, if you didn't do your homework and watch that film. So tell us a little bit about what's underneath that narrative for you.
Yeah, sure. First of all, the hint that I tried to give in the film is the link between the mother and the Mekong River. So the mother is like a symbol for Mekong, which the word mẹ, the word mom, mother in Laos, is also the word that it means a mother in Mekong. It's the same word, mẹ, which is mean mother, and Mekong, which
the
is
mother
mean,
mother Kong, the mother river. Yeah.
Mother, yeah, mother river. So that's the first hint that I try to put in the film, and then brother, sister, children's, basically like the other countries around Mekong that we can harvest, we can make get benefits from the Mekong, but also we also killing her at the same time while we're trying to make something out of her. So that's like the dilemma that I put in the film. And of course, when we in the beginning of the film, which is very helpful for us as a filmmaker, Prabang organized a workshop with the Mekong River Commissions, and so we get to sit down with the experts of the river, and we learn a lot about data and the activities, the projects that have been going on, trying to save the river basically, and share this to make it sustainable. And we see that there's no right or wrong answers. It's like you can't to tackle this problem, you can't be extreme, like environmentalist extreme, like we still have poor country that can make use of hydropower. I mean, I can understand both sides, both point of view. So I'm kind of like, okay, so let's have that in the film where the character discuss like these needs, but so at the end we just have to find a balance of taking from it and also make it sustainable. Did that answer your question?
That definitely answered my question. Yes. Good. And so there is this tension that comes out in all of the films, and I'm sure that we'll talk at length about that, between the problems of use and overuse, right? And how do we've obviously, we're not finding that right balance. And so so let me ask you, right? So we have two different audiences really for this film. We have local audiences in Laos, and we have international audiences. And I think, from my own work, the more hardline environmentalist, no dams, no fishing, no anything, just keep the river pristine. Those voices typically come from outside the country. They typically come from people living in market supported urban environments who don't really understand the reality of making a living. So can you talk a little bit about the different responses from the different audiences in these two places as you've been showing the film around?
Well, unfortunately, the film is not yet like distribute like for most of the local audience, right? I'd like to hear from the producers too. What's the plan for the next distribution in Laos?
Well, you know,
Because I
we've
love
had the pandemic you predicted for a couple of years now, and so we haven't had live events at all. And we've long planned a big event around Mekong 2030 when we have a festival again, and that's going to happen in December. So we'll see then. I mean, we have shown it to Lao audiences in smaller groups, and I can speak a little bit to that. But Anysay is right. There's been no major distribution in the country, and really screenings of the film thus far have been at festivals. We had a great 2-year run of festival appearances, won some awards around the world, and lots of screenings like the one we're talking about now, in fact. But yeah, I'll let Anysay go back.
Yeah. But yeah, like Sean said, like for their festival circus, like we get a good feedback so far. But I believe that's why I also stick to the narrations that can be followed like emotionally, like you can easily understand character purpose, you can easily identify the conflict, and you follow the character until the end. But after that, it's even though it's an open end, which is not typical for Lao audience, but I hope it can like make them questions like what's the ending means. So yeah, I look forward to hear more from the general audience, because in Laos most of audience, the majority, it's a long history of cinema industry in Laos that it's already that was dead a long time ago. So people have was it more of consume of a more simple story structure. Yeah.
Okay. That's nice. So we don't know what the local audience's reaction is, but you think that this might be just a little bit outside of their normal media consumption. Let me ask you, I had a question pop in. Let me just ask you, because we have just a couple minutes before you have to run. So there's a question about the mother. So in the film, the mother is really a non-entity, right? She is not speaking. She has no, she's right. She's a dead body. Yeah. And it's actually interesting because that was one of the symbolisms that I took away, because that's really how we think of that river. We think of all of these things as like natural resources. They're just dead. They're just lying there for us to suck stuff out of. And this is how your mother is, and she has no speaking role. What was your intention when you created this character that way?
Yeah, the intention is to hint to the audience as much as we can. That's also involve there's a scene that we try to link when the children, when the sons pay respect to her. So we design some movement that he also did that same thing when he paid respect to the river at the end of the story. So yeah, we have that in mind when we write the script. Yeah.
Okay, good. And you gave, and there were some clues in there that probably the Lao audience is going to pick up on. The international audience might not pick up on that.
I hope it's universal.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I think that this question about her sort of passivity and voicelessness, like she doesn't speak, she's passive. it sort of reflects the idea of stewardship as well. I mean, she's under the care of her family. Now, the care doesn't really look great, right? I mean, it doesn't look like they care, but she's in their stewardship, much like the river is in the stewardship of the people here in the region. So I think that's part of it as well, right? Like the river isn't gonna speak to us necessarily, but Anysay can speak more to that.
Well, yeah, like I love to hear that how you guys interpret in a way that helps support the story, which is the enjoy from being a writer and a director. Yeah.
And that's nice. That's interesting. I'm actually, because I feel like, we're not really the stewards of our mothers. Our mothers give us life. Our mothers are everything for us. And without our mothers, we are nothing. Now, when they're about to die, we often take on some stewardship roles, but the larger role is really mother supporting us and us following mother's rules.
I think that's a really nice way of reading the whole thing. Yeah, that's great.
Nice. Well, those are all of my set questions. I wonder, Anysay, if you have anything that you think about. Oh, let me ask one other thing. Do you still have a couple of minutes, Anysay?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you about Che. Okay. So Che Guevara. I know you said that this was kind of based on a book that you were reading at the time, but say more about that. What do you want us to pull out of that? What are you doing with Che there?
Well, when I read it and when I got inspired by it, and how I can connect it to this film is the way that I think. Well, Che has this communism ideal. And I feel like, this can represent Laos as a communist, as a socialist countries where we have the set of idealism that we want to go there, but struggling to go there. So yeah, that's just how I see the connections.
Okay, that's really. I mean, I think that we could talk for a half an hour about that, because currently Laos socialism is so interesting, and it's a dynamic hybrid of capitalist actions and socialist speaking that's having some real effects and some really interesting on the ground social effects and responses. What are you seeing in the kind of cultivation of social life and this interaction between the people and their economies in this socialist moment in Laos?
I'm not sure if I understand your questions.
Well,
can you
so
rephrase?
Okay, so how does Che Guevara and his kind of communist socialist ideology compare or speak to what you're seeing happening on the ground now in Laos?
We kind of losing that touch already. It's like the new generation growing up, and it's more like about making a living now. The middle class people, I don't see them talk much about politics, or it's because of how it was designed to make you not to think about it so much in a way. So that's why I feel like it's interesting to talk about it too. Like, are we if we want to be a socialism, but why we kind of like lack of self-reflection or looking at ourselves, and are we heading that way, or what's happening now? It's like sometimes I I don't feel like I live in a communist country. Honestly, sometimes I feel like, oh, it's like living, because I live like many years in Thailand as well when I study there. So I kind of like at the micro level, at the individual level, family, small community level, the vibe, the rule, the that have on you, you don't feel that affects, but you only focus on making a living. But when, but to look at the bigger pictures, kind of like, is it like, are we heading to the right directions or not? Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did definitely answer my question, and really nicely, because I think that ties in so well with the health of the river, right? With the health of our mother, and how the idea of a collective is a little bit lost in the current moment. It's hard to think of a collective when you're just trying to make sure you have food on your own table, right?
Right. Oh, and another interesting point is that when I do research to write the script, there's one article about the dam projects that's also like interesting, because the upper river countries have more advantage of it, right? So the downward river, the country that lived in the downward, kind of trying to protest, like, hey, don't stop the project. But it's irony that that country that tried to protest also have like 30 or 40 dams projects going on within their countries. So I see this like, it can be interesting character right here. Yeah. So yeah.
That's nice. And you pull that, I think that you pull that out a little bit in the film with the young man who's been studying, the guy who loves Che Guevara, has been living in the city, studying, taking the money from his family, right? Is that...
Yeah, irony. Yeah.
Oh, nice, very nice. Well, I just, thank you so much for making this really provocative and thought-provoking clip. And so I think that we will switch gears now and give the producers the opportunity to talk a little bit about what they had in mind. And anytime you need to jump out, then you can just do that. And if you hang around, maybe if other questions pop in and you're still here, I'll just sort of jump in and see if you can answer another question for us. Okay.
Thank you. I enjoyed this session a lot, but I have to leave now. I have to take the children to the school.
You go run and take care of your children. Thank you so much, Anysay. It was really lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, then, Alex and Sean, it's just us. So this is great. I'm really excited to hear from the both of you what you had in mind, what your vision was for this film. But before we do that, can I just ask each of you to kind of introduce yourselves? Who are you, and where do you come from, and how did you come to be here right now? Alex, can we start with you? Oh, Sean, start with you.
No, I was going to suggest Alex goes.
Okay, I'll go first. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me here. It's been great so far. And yeah, so I'm Alex, and I'm originally from the United States, and I'm calling in from Boston right now. I'm currently an associate producer for a TV show, America's Test Kitchen. So it's all about telling stories about food and cooking. It's been great. But before this, I was in Laos working for the Luang Prabang Film Festival for over 2.5 years. I started off as a festival coordinator, and then the managing director of the festival. And during my time there, I had the opportunity to produce this film. So I can talk a little bit about how it all kind of originated. So the idea came from the founder of the festival, Gabriel Cooperman. And as a Southeast Asian film festival, we were thinking, like, how can we do a project that combines multiple countries? And one common thread is literally the Mekong River, right? And so it's also, not only is it a common thread, but it's a common issue. I mean, over 60 million people rely on the Mekong River. Like, that's an incredible amount of people. It's the 7th largest river in Asia. It's an incredible resource for people's livelihoods, not let alone like the biodiversity that's in that river. It's not just a resource for humans, but for the world. It's an incredible piece of nature. And it's, being affected by hydropower projects, overfishing, climate change. Like, there's so much happening to it. And I feel like there's not that much talk about it. And so that's kind of why we came up with this project. And we didn't want to do a documentary and just saying, like, here's what's happening, because also in the climate that we're in, it's difficult to do a documentary and saying something like matter-of-factly. So, being able to talk about the Mekong in the future and like, oh, this is what it might look like, is able to allow our filmmakers to speak a little bit more freely with a little bit more creative expression, so that we can, share more about what's actually happening in the Mekong. So that's kind of how, the project came to be. And then I'm sure I can talk a little bit more about it later. So I'll let Sean pop in and say who he is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll note that Alex was part of the project way before I was. So she knows more about the distant past and the origins than I can speak to. I was just on a different call earlier this week and they were asking me about that. I was like, I'm not sure. And I was glad to hear Anysay talk about the selection process, right? That you guys, solicited proposals from filmmakers in the lower Mekong countries. It's one of those things that I walked into and they were halfway done and it was like, this thing is amazing. I mean, I can't believe this tiny organization is producing this giant film. And so I'll back up and say, I first moved to, my background is academic, actually. I was an English professor for a lot of years in Texas, and wound up, after living in India for a while, in China, where I was teaching at a startup university in Shanghai. And when I grew bored with that, my wife and I moved to Luang, Prabang, where she was working at the Traditional Arts and Ethnology Center here, just a great institution, also hanging on through the pandemic. And I volunteered for the film festival in 2014. I was teaching film studies in China and elsewhere. And so it was a passion of mine and I was excited about it. And I, quickly became part of the fabric of the organization as a volunteer for a couple of years. And then in 2019, we had moved back to the US and I was invited to come back and take over the leadership of the organization. And I did so a little bit reluctantly because I was happy living in New Orleans. But we were thrilled to come back to Luang Prabang. Turns out to take over the leadership of a festival organization 6 months before a pandemic is a terrible idea. If I had known what Anysay knew, I might not have done it. But no regrets, exactly. Just that it's been a pretty serious challenge, as you might imagine. So, and that's the long and short of it. We, the organization, the Luang Prabang Film Festival, is the only international event that's exclusive to the 10-country Southeast Asia Coalition. And we've been that way since the start. Since 2010 was the first festival. And we work to produce a festival that's a really high production value. and sort of low stakes. That is, we bring filmmakers, we give them a chance to interact and to network. We don't mess with jury prizes or anything like that. So we've always sort of been about this, creating this atmosphere where filmmakers can collaborate and develop new ideas and work together, and specifically giving Lao filmmakers access to those networks across Southeast Asia. And so we have things like, we run an annual grant for Lao filmmakers, the Lao Filmmakers Fund. We're the only organization in the country that makes grants directly to filmmakers. That's run annually since 2013. We also ran a talent lab with Tribeca Film Institute for 4 years, 2016 to 2019, where we brought projects from around the region and helped them with development and to look for international co-production funding, basically. So those are the big picture things. And so in that context, like, the idea for Mekong 2030 emerged, and it felt really natural to the organization, I think, to say, well, even the way we program the festival is by relying on people we call motion picture ambassadors. So it's 1 or 2 people in each of the countries. We reach out to their critics or their academics or their filmmakers, and we say, tell us what we should be showing this year. And so we're able to reach out to that network and say, give us some filmmakers to solicit proposals for Mekong 2030. And we wound up with great stuff. So that's all I'll say about the sort of big picture. And I do want to talk, Courtney, as you said earlier, I'd love to talk about some of the more, let's say, esoteric entries in that collection. And I'd like to hear from Alex about her memory of working, the back and forth with directors, of working out some of those stories as they developed.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Sean. And actually, that's something that I wasn't really aware of. I thought that you put out a call and people sent you films, but they didn't. They sent you ideas, and you together created films. No,
we put out a call and said, hey, we have a bunch of money to fund 20-minute films. Who wants in? Right. And so, right, that was the framework.
Yeah, but I think it's important to say that these were like high quality films that took, it was kind of crazy that we tasked them with doing it in less than a year. Like, we were really pushing our limit. We really wanted it done by 2020. So it was 10 years into the future. We put out the call in 2019. And then we started like selecting the filmmakers. We had our summit in March of 2019. So we were providing information, and then they were writing their scripts. They were shooting in the summer. We were doing post-production in the fall. And then we did a private premiere in December 2019. And then we were going to have our international premiere in Cambodia. I was about to fly over, and then the whole world shut down. That was in 2020, like, so March a year later. So that's the timeline of the project. But it was, and then before that, we had a whole year like coming up with the project and sourcing funds for it. So it was definitely a really long process, and reviewing scripts, making sure. And what was important too is we wanted to make sure. So, okay, Courtney, you mentioned this before we started, but I'll say, if you've watched the films, they are different. Like, some of them are very straightforward, some are not. And we had to have some conversations with the filmmakers and be like, okay, this is about the Mekong, right? Like, we're talking about the Mekong River. We're gonna, right? Is it in there? And what was also really important to us is that we hired filmmakers from those countries. We did not want to outsource an international renowned director or anything like, and we did find actually international renowned directors in those countries, but that was really important to us because they were going to tell their perspective in their own language, in their theatrical language. Like, it was just me and Sean and the film festival's job to help facilitate that and bring their voices to life. And so I think the films while they're very different, they are so representative of those countries themselves and their relationship with the Mekong. Like the Mekong is in all those films, and you'll see there's overlapping themes. Like family comes up in every single one of the films in different ways. And then also they're so different in different ways. And it just shows you like Southeast Asia is not just Southeast Asia. The Mekong region is not just the Mekong region. Like they're so different. But they all have this one thing that combines them. And it's really important to bring together, not just for people living regionally, but for the rest of the world to recognize it. And I believe that like knowledge is power. And so being able to share this story is not giving people regionally the power, but everyone to be like, oh yeah, I should pay attention. It's because then when, you know, a new dam is coming up, people can be like, hey, maybe I don't want that. Like people can have the knowledge to at least say no, or at least have an opinion on it. And I think that's really important. So I know I just kind of rambled on there with a lot of words.
I want to cut in for a second, if I can, Alex, and say,
yeah, go ahead.
In the call I was on earlier this week, somebody had a question. They really loved the order of the films. And they were like, how did you pick that? Because it just works somehow. And so I had to admit that we chose them in alphabetical order by country name because we found it really hard to make a decision otherwise. And it, you know, like it does work in the end. Like it's, I think it's a nice order for the films. But and that speaks to like something Alec just said. We couldn't have seen some of these sort of motifs emerge until it was done. I mean, it was in that regard, it's a creative work, and the work of a producer like Alex is it's a creative role, right? I mean, she's talking to people in 5 different countries. This is there weren't a lot of Zoom calls. There wasn't Zoom really. We used Skype when we needed to talk, and that was usually when there was a problem, right, Alex? I mean, I think that we called somebody for a Skype call if they had fallen behind schedule or something, but otherwise it was all email. So the 5 didn't know. They met in, as Anysay said, they met in Vientiane for 2 days. Was it 2 days, Alex? So
2.5.
Yeah, so Oxfam and the Mekong River Commission made presentations about the river and about the future. And the filmmakers talked then, went back, revised their scripts after that experience. And then they didn't see each other again until we premiered the film in Laos. We screened it once in Laos, a sort of like, what do we call that, Alex? A print preview, you know, like, yeah. So it wasn't an official premiere, but we brought all 5 there to Vientiane at the very end of 2019, and they saw each other's work for the first time. And that was the point at which we were all saying, oh, look at these resonances and look at how these things fit together. And, you know, they all deal with family in some way, or they, you know, like here's how they address the river. And for me, one of the big takeaways watching them, of course, we saw them coming together here in the Luang Prabang over the, you know, course of 6 or 8 months. But for me, one of the takeaways was the diversity of people that depend on the river and live along the river. It's just, I mean, so when you go from a film like Size, set in the Akha community in Myanmar, to Bangkok, right? I mean, it's just this jarring realization that there's a lot happening in this region. As Alex said, 60 million people, right? So it's kind of a bit, you know, it's kind of important for the rest of the world, I think, to grasp that and that diversity.
Yes, and that really comes out, which is so important. I know that that Sean, you prompted Alex to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that she had as the films were coming together. And that was a question that I had, definitely. If these were coming together at the moment, right, with you in collaboration with the film festival, what were some of the surprising things that happened? Did the script change while you were filming? Did any funny things happen on set that might be illuminating to share with us? What stories do you have from the field?
Sure, I'll share a few. So it was, like Sean said, it was a very unique challenge for me to talk with 5 different filmmakers from 5 different countries, and they're having their own unique challenges, and they're also having their own unique way of communicating that with me. So I was basically project managing everyone. So like sometimes it was Facebook Messenger, sometimes it was email, sometimes it was phone call. They all had their own way that they wanted to talk to me. And also sometimes like language barriers like comes in the way. Or sometimes different ways of, sometimes you don't want to say if there's an issue. Sometimes you want to say exactly what the issue is. It's totally, everyone's their own person, so it's going to be different. But some of the issues that will come up, and I think Sean tells the story one the best, is Kulikar had to delay her whole filming and completely change her shoot because of environmental factors. And like usually it's like rainy season where she wanted to shoot like a flooding scene, and there wasn't like any rain yet. Like the seasons were changing, and we're like, well, that's an issue right there in itself. Like, so she had to go shoot somewhere else, and we're like,
Oh, so the flood scenes are not in Cambodia.
oh, they are in Cambodia. They're like in like, Sean, you tell the story. You do good at this. Oh no, did we lose him? Is he there?
Looks like we lost him. Okay, you have to tell it.
Oh, okay. Well, we had to move to more. It's like where the Mekong River, it's like the tonal sap meets. So it's more of like a basin, like a bigger lake area. I'm not using the correct wordage here, but it's like it is part of the river, but it moves on to the larger part. So yeah, it was yeah. So she had to move her location because of that. So that was kind of a crazy thing on itself. Sean, are you there?
I'm back. Yeah, the stuff with Tonle Sap, and I think that when she finally was able to shoot, then it started raining, and there was a risk of flood, and there was a lot of mud everywhere, and they had problems with the boats. And Kulikar doesn't really like to be on a boat, and so I mean, there was a whole thing where she tells the story really wonderfully, actually. And I'm so sorry she couldn't join us today. There's a whole thing where, you know, she could see it suddenly, right? She had this epiphany, like everything she was told by the Mekong River Commission. Oh, I get it, because I'm standing knee deep in mud. I should be all the way underwater at this point in the season, right? I mean, Tonle Sap is a seasonal lake, as Courtney, you probably know. And it's had some rough years lately. This year, it seems normal, but what that means is Kulikar today is stuck in the rain and unable to join us.
Nice. That is just a little bit poetic. That's a perfect. It fits perfectly with this story that you guys are telling with Mekong 2030. I like what Alex was saying about the importance or the kind of political maneuvering room that you get by setting this in the future. You're not setting it today. You're not pointing any fingers at anybody. You're imagining what might be happening. And so we're getting close to time. We want to make sure that we have time for questions from the audience. But I wonder if you guys can both speak to some of the ambiguities in the films that you present. There's some of them that are where there is no explicit narrative. So can you?
I think that's a nice way of putting it, Courtney.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, interrupt me at any point. But in fact, my earliest memory of this project is reading some correspondence between Alex and Anocha about Anocha's script, the Thai film. And I think Gabriel was involved in that discussion as well. And there was just a lot of, we asked them to come up with these stories that were about the threats of the Mekong River and about ways of addressing those. And we're looking at the emerging version of Anocha's film and not really getting it. And frankly, I was, as an outsider, I thoroughly enjoyed these conversations. I mean, like just as discourse, it was fascinating, right, to watch this sort of give and take between the producer and the creative professional. Like, yeah, but this is what I want to do. And when we saw the first cut of Anocha's film, and we realized it was about an artist struggling to make some art about the river and not being able to do that, right? Like running into all these challenges. I mean, we just burst into laughter. Like, I mean, it was like in a really positive way. It was like, oh my God, you know, she's a genius, right? And so, you know, like we were starting to get it. And as, you know, like I had to watch that film a lot of times, to be honest, Courtney, before I felt comfortable talking about it. But now, I mean, it's probably my favorite in the collection. And I think that what she and her partner, Paul, I mean, they worked on the screenplay and the film together. It's Paul, right, Alex? Yeah. You know, they were really interested in thinking about object-oriented ontology and its connection to animism in Southeast Asia and Thailand. And, you know, can we think about things like the river as, you know, like differently, right? Like forget about the subject-object perspective, and can we, you know, that line, right? I mean, the name of her film is The Line. Are there ways around that line? Are there ways of going back to some different relationship with the river and with nature? And yeah, it's pretty, I think you have to work pretty hard to get there. And, you know, the final shot of a toaster is challenging, right? I mean, it's just like, what just happened in this film? And then before you know it, you're swept off to Vietnam, and Lon's really beautiful film. So I think that like, that really needs some time to settle. But it was, and this is what I mean, I think when I said it's at core, it's a creative project. You know, Alex and Anocha, they made this together, really. I mean, it was a series of discussions and negotiations, and what you wind up with isn't what you think necessarily you're going to get. But I think I can speak for us and say we're really proud of what we wound up with.
Yeah, and I think I want to add, just you mentioned before about people asking about the order. We got really lucky with how we did it alphabetically by country. It's such a random thing we decided, but it worked out really well because we have those two. I mean, we had three films that are a bit more easy to grasp and set the scene, and you really see the river. Like, you got it. You got the point, you know what they're talking about. And then we end with those two other films that are a bit more like abstract, a bit more metaphorical, a bit more challenge you to think deeper. And the only way you can do that is if we have those first three first, so it sets it up. So you're prepared, you're ready to start thinking a bit deeper. And then kind of with Lon's slow film that fades into darkness, it eases you out of the film to go and think more in the darkness about the Mekong River. So I think we got incredibly lucky with how we ordered the film, and I wouldn't change it anyway. But yeah, I forget what the question even was, but I just want to say that.
We were talking about the abstract nature of the,
right.
of
Okay,
the
that
collection.
makes sense.
So that was a perfectly abstract answer. That was
great.
No, I thought that the order was actually quite intentional, because of the way that you end at the end, and the way that I took away the young man sitting at the river is in connection with what the monk was saying, you know, about the river just taking all of us back, and whatever you've done, when you submerge yourself, when you sit and let yourself be there with the river, your innocence returns.
Alex, maybe we should just lie about that. I mean, maybe we should just make up a story. I mean, it was
intentional. For a long time.
I mean, Courtney, if we do, we're going to steal what you just said.
Okay, that's perfect. You totally can. That is free game. That is free game. And I particularly like the way that the Thai film, that The Line, was really so quintessentially urban, elite, educated, and dealing with the river at this just fantastic level of abstraction. You know, It's in the film. I love that scene. And honestly, I had to watch that 3 or 4 times too. I'm here. I'm in the middle. I'm kind of brown. I'm like, what? Who are you? Where are you? And then I became invisible. It was so nice. And I knew exactly what she was doing because that's my research agenda. I work in this kind of object-oriented, ontological shifting space and talk to my students about it regularly. So I knew what she was talking about with the invisible, but you know, that's going to be a little bit of a stretch. And I appreciate that you kind of left it there for people to expand into or not as they might. Right? Nice. So when you had when you put out the call, how many responses did you get for films?
We got a lot. I want to say about 30.
Okay.
Which is a good amount. I think we put out the call specifically to 60 people, 60 filmmakers. So we got half of a response, and that's not just saying, hey, I want to do it. It's writing out the whole, like providing an idea and a concept and a small budget. It's like a small treatment, basically. So we had to take a long time to sort through, like the selection process was very difficult. And we had to make sure that we had a variety of voices. And so we weren't just going to pick like the biggest filmmakers from each country. We wanted to make sure that we were representing the Mekong region as fairly as possible through the voices, and also through the different kinds of stories. So we didn't want, I think there perhaps were a few stories that were slightly similar, but you know, it would be weird to have 2 pandemic stories, right? Like,
were there really 2 pandemic stories?
No, but like, but there were some that were like a bit, you know, we wanted to have variety in the content, in the people, in the voices. So that was all taken into consideration. So, but there was a lot of people interested in taking part of it. I think because of the topic, it was cool on multiple levels, on like creatively thinking into the future. It was a very fun, like Anysay mentioned, that it was like a very fun project for him. He's like, oh, cool. I get to play around with this a bit more. Like, what's in the future? Like in 10 years, like, it's not just super futuristic. It's like, it's kind of a funny place to start getting creative. And also, I think people really reacted to the prompt because it's not just thinking creatively in the future, it's now, it's happening right here, and it's important, and it affects them and people they love around them. So yeah, we got a great response from people wanting to be part of this project.
That's really surprising and so kind of encouraging. And so we have just a couple minutes left before we open it up for audience questions, but I want to ask what this says then about, I want to ask about the distribution of like representatives from how many countries, right? Did you get, was it a sort of an equal distribution? And if you had 30 responses, did you get 3 or 5 from each country, or was there an overwhelming number from Thailand and only a few from Cambodia? Is that kind of how it worked?
Yeah, I mean, generally you can look at the film industry, like across the region, and there's a huge Thai and Vietnamese film industry. So we definitely had a larger response from those countries just because there are more filmmakers from those countries.
Right. But you chose one from each of the countries along the Mekong. So the competition was more stiff for your Thai and Vietnamese colleagues.
This is true.
That's tricky. Were there any films that you think So if and maybe this is more a question for Sean, but he was talking about how the Luang Prabang Film Festival supports filmmaking in other in other venues, that you have a lot of grants and that you support a lot of filmmakers. Were there any relationships that came out of that? Were any of the applicants encouraged to apply for another type of funding arrangement? Do you know?
That's a great question. It's been like, I mean, at this point, it's been about like 3 years since the very beginning of like when we started selecting, but I think it definitely created, I mean, I'll still say I'm still a strong part of the film festival. I talk to Sean often. I love the Luang Prabang Film Festival, even though I don't technically work there. I'm an honorary volunteer. But the film festival is very active in trying to support not just the Lao film industry, but the regional industry in itself. And part of Mekong 2030, I think mostly we got more engagement by the film itself, not necessarily just like the call, because then people were like, oh, wow, they're doing this cool project. Are they doing anything else like that? Can I get involved? So we definitely have more people, and they're paying attention more to our Facebook page, and they're looking at the calls. So I think that definitely helped us gain more traction to the film festival. And then as a result, to our resources that we offer to filmmakers across the region.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. That's very interesting. Because I know that in Cambodia, I know especially the film industry is really starting to cook, and in Laos it is starting to cook. But of course these things need a big pot, and they need some heat, and that's how you make a good film industry soup, right? So Sean, I don't know if
there.
So thank you for answering those questions. We do have a few questions from the audience. So Sean, did you want to jump in at all on this, on the question of the film festival and the calls that you had?
I totally missed the question because the internet went down here for about 3 minutes. So I just rejoined the call, actually. So I missed all of that. So no, let's move on to the audience questions. I'm sure Alex was great.
She was brilliant. She was brilliant. Okay, so we have a question about the vetting processes by the different national governments from right where the filmmakers were represented. The questioner is thinking particularly of Laos, but were there any issues with the national governments involved? Anything that needed to be cut?
Sean?
Not that I recall, Alex. I mean, in Laos, filmmakers have to submit scripts before they can even begin working, right? So here it's got to be cleared from the start, and Anysay, who's really modest, I think, he understands that process very well, and he knows how to write a story that is going to be cleared. So I don't think he had any issues with his script here. And I don't know exactly what the processes were in the 4 other countries, like before filming, but I don't know of any issue we had after films were made.
No, not after they were made. I think that's what someone was asking about. Have they been screened locally? And just to clarify, we did have the private preview in Luang Prabang in 2019, and then in Vientiane in Laos, and then we had a virtual film festival in 2020.
It was free to all 10 countries in 2020 for about a week. People watched it then. It showed at the Watan Film Festival in Myanmar and had a big turnout. I mean, that was also virtual that year. And I'm trying to think where else in the region it's screened.
Thailand.
Do you know, Alex?
There was
okay.
a Bangkok. There was a few where I was able to screen virtually because of pandemic reasons.
We actually screened it in Thailand very early in 2020 as well, like just before, like the last trip we all made out of the country, west of Thailand. We screened it at a festival there for a live audience.
Oh,
But I guess the question is about the vetting system. So I think we had a difficult time trying to screen it in so I mean, for context, I'm like in Laos, there's only 3 cinemas. Like, so getting to screen the film there is difficult on its own. And it's similar in Vietnam as well. And you have to get permits and licensing to screen it. So the films were able to they all went through their own different I think Vietnam, Luang also had to submit paperwork to the government to get approved. And I think Kulikar as well. But so most of the issues don't come during the filming. It's more of the screening process. And it just depends on the tone, the vibe, and who's in charge. If you luck out or not, so it totally depends. It could change tomorrow. Who knows?
That is a continually surprising element of the law and the bureaucracy that that living and working in Southeast Asia helps us remember regularly. That it just really depends on who's sitting in the hot seat that day. Well, I'm glad to hear that you didn't run into any issues and that you were able to just run most of them. Nice, thank you. So we have another question from the audience, and this person is probably from Southern California, especially Long Beach, where we have the largest Cambodian population outside of Southeast Asia. And so the question is, how do people in this area or people outside the region support this very important film and the Mekong 2030 project in general? And additionally, will there be another film project on the Mekong that you're working on now or will be working on?
I mean, I would say for me, the most important thing is to just share the information you've learned. So like one of my favorite talking points whenever I come back to the States, I'm like, did you know that Laos is the most bombed country in the entire world because of the United States? Like, and people don't know. It's mind-boggling. So I'm always like, did you know that 60 million people live on the Mekong River and it's becoming endangered? And people are like, what? It's just, for me, that's, if you're not like in, I don't know, if you're not in government or if you're not an environmental scientist and you're not doing, the most important thing is just sharing it, sharing the knowledge and making sure that eventually it does get to those people. I believe awareness is super key to solving issues like this. So just making a bit of noise, I think is really important.
Making noise. I am all in for that. I tell my students that a lot too, because we talk about these issues and they say, what do we do? What do we do? And because policy doesn't seem to be moving, but making noise, policy cooks up from the bottom in the end. If we're noisy enough, they're going to have to change it.
Exactly. They can't ignore it eventually.
Right. Sean, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just speak to the second part of that question about future projects. You know, at the moment, we're lucky to still be here at all, frankly, after 2 years of pandemic. I mean, the festival is our major source of unrestricted funding. And so all the projects we run generally are based on our ability to host a festival sometime in December. So we're waiting to see what happens this year, except I do have, you know, permission to have a festival. It's very exciting this December, a live international event. But, you know, I think if you had asked us all in December 2019 if we would produce another movie someday, we would have said no, absolutely not, no way. You know, we don't want to have anything to do with that ever again. No, I think, you know, like, oh, that was really great. I mean, you know, memory works this way. And absolutely, I mean, if we get to a place where we have the resources and we have the, you know, the funders, like the ones who stepped in to support Mekong 2030, then certainly it's something we would consider. I mean, you know, I think in the end we did some good. We're proud of the work, And, we maintain those connections and relationships around the region that make it possible for us to imagine this kind of production. And so why not?
Nice. That's a good answer. I want to kind of follow up on that question. And so funding is always an issue. Is there a way, do you take donations from people? I mean, is
Please
there
donate.
please donate.
We do take donations.
Do we have a GoFundMe site or anything?
We have, so you can donate to the Luang Prabang Film Festival organization in two ways. Both are pretty clear on our website, which is lpfilmfest.org. And one of those is a US-based 501c3 that is sort of a coalition of cultural organizations here in Luang Prabang that can receive donations from the States that can then be tax deductible for Americans, at least. And then they pass those along to us. And the other is just to directly support us, which you can easily do on our website, and sign up for our newsletter, because that's also on the homepage of the website. You'll find out when, I often ask people directly for money in the newsletter. So yes, we take donations. Our normal model, Courtney, is to have a big festival to bring in a lot of sponsor income during that event. And that pushes us through. And with the sort of grants for programming that we get through the year, we're able to operate and do what we do for Lao filmmakers and others in the region. So it's really, the position we're in now is trying to rebuild capacity post-COVID. And I think we're not unique in that regard. I mean, I think that's pretty much every nonprofit organization in the world right now.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's a constant struggle. I'm so glad that you guys kind of were able to weather the storm and are still here and able to do some work. Well, we've run out of questions from the audience, which means that I get to ask some of my own questions. So now we're going to say, so I don't know if you guys ever watch Monty Python, but like now for something completely different. We were just talking about funding, but I want to get back to this issue of the river and the kind of challenge that we're facing at this historical moment, with understanding the river as a dead, inert object that we can suck things from, like the mother in the Che brothers, and understanding the river as actually the driving source of what we are able to do, and altering our perception of the river, which could also alter our interactions with the river. And this comes out in numerous ways in the different films that you show. And I just wonder if you guys can speak to that a little bit in your own work, thinking about the Mekong and where it's going and what you're doing.
I guess the Mekong is strong. It's I don't know if you've been to the Mekong River. It's a strong river. I mean, in Laos, from the time I was there and from what I know today, the issues we're seeing is flooding. So it's hard. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as dead. It's kind of like it's mad. Like it's like that's how I would describe it. It's not just like a sad dying thing. It's pissed off, and it's from the things are being built and not necessarily in the best way possible, and then that's causing a lot of flooding, and it's displacing homes, and it's ruining agriculture. And I mean, the river is still flowing there so far. It's just causing a lot of mayhem for the people who are causing this issue in the first place. So for me, it's like the benefit the people if we start taking care of it more. That's kind of my perception of what's happening right now, specifically in Laos.
Alex, it's presently at normal levels, which is for the first time in like 3 years. And it's running pretty fast right now. Like it's when you see it running like this, you realize how powerful it is. I mean, there's some currents out there. There's stuff moving down the river. It's, the color of mud right now. So there's a lot of rain all the way up into China even this year. But Courtney, I actually like the way you put it a minute ago to say that, I want to hope that one thing we achieve with the film is just, even if just for a moment, getting people to change their relationship to the river as object, to beginning to think of the river as something else, as sustenance or subject, or, like what it might be for people here. And I think that we haven't touched on the Burmese film yet, but I think that the relationship to the river in that film is the most explicit, right?
Right.
And it's not, I don't know if it's clear to everyone, but that film is Sai is a Shan, he's ethnically Shan, and he's working with a group of ethnic Akha. It's an ethnic Akha village, and it wasn't his script in the first place. We had originally approved a different director. This is exciting background, deleted scene kind of information, right. And she couldn't complete the project, and so recommended Sai, and we talked with him, and he's lovely. In fact, I'm concerned we haven't heard from him in this whole process. He's usually one of the first to join in on things like this. But he went to the village with the script, and they talked. Everybody in the village is an amateur actor. I mean, they participated in making the story together and acted in it, and and Sai sort of coordinated all of this. So it's a really, coming at the heart of the film as it does. I think it's really cool that this is the one that's about a relationship to the river that is deep, and it's personal, and it's expressed overtly, right? So I think that's really cool. So yeah, I'm rambling a little bit, of course, but I think that's a nice question, and something we wanted to do was to get people to just be aware, to be able to sort of see the river in their minds. It's hard to imagine even the other side of the planet, right? Like if you don't live there, if you don't know someone who lives there. So to give people something conceptual they can latch onto, and I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, nice. I love your comments about the people in the Akha village. I did not realize that these were the villagers that live in that village.
Yeah,
Nice.
and that one of the favorite performers from live audiences when we had the chance to show it is the old woman. Everyone loves her, right? She's fantastic. Yeah.
Yes, and so in representative of so many of the elders that I've met in so many villages, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, here in Taiwan as well. And the elders really they're just, what are you doing? and I like the tension, and this kind of will help me lead into another question that popped in. That film in Akha, the Unseen River, this one, it shows up that really important tension of this modernity induced tension between the political authority and the authority of the elders. That really comes out nicely, and of course the way that we've done things for so many generations before the very recent past, is that the elders made the decisions because they've been around the block a bunch of times and they know all of the stupid things that you can do when you're going around the block. And that moment where the young man says, excuse me, says, well, I'm the village chief now, and so you really need to do what I say. And she, you know, she just walks out. It really captured something so important, I think, for this historical moment. And the question that comes in from the audience is, to what extent can this film influence local government or central government to take action and to discuss the protection of the river? Have you seen anything happening yet, or what are your hopes and dreams on this one?
Alex, you go ahead.
Okay, I'll go first. I mean, part of what I was saying before with government policies is they get to decide what gets screened or not. So trying to, I mean, and that's why some of these countries have it's a growing film industry. There's not a lot of support from the government because storytelling is really powerful, right? And so sometimes that doesn't always want to be supported. So it's difficult. It's a very difficult balance and you just hope that people will watch it and that it'll make some noise, and eventually it will, I mean, young people will see it and that they'll rise up into positions of power. I don't know. It's complicated for me. Sean, what do you guys say?
Well, I think that's really hopeful, Alex. I mean, I think like that's a much more positive response than I was going to offer, just why I wanted you to go first. I mean, but I think Alex is right that the best hope for that lies in younger people engaging with the work, and not just this film really, but any work like that. I think that I mean, you know, I think I'm a little bit cynical about the notion that it would directly impact policy in the present, or that really any kind of storytelling or project like this would have much impact. I mean, I think that, you know, we're glad to be able to share it, right? We're glad that there's not a problem with us exhibiting the film and sharing it with whatever audiences we want to here. Like that's and we had to ask for permission to screen it as well when it was finished, and we had the date for our print preview in Vientiane. It was a big event. We had spent a lot of money on printed invitations and catering and rented a movie theater and all of that before we knew for sure we were going to be allowed to show it, right? And because we were waiting on that permission. And that's probably them telling you to end this, Courtney. So I think, like, and in the end, it was fine. It was no big deal. Like they said, sure, you can screen it, and that permission stands. And so we do have the opportunity to reach people with those stories, and maybe those people in the future can exert some influence, or maybe they can even do so now. But I don't feel really hopeful about that. I mean, I'm just glad that it's not what we made is something that stands on its own. It doesn't have to be, it's not a series of didactic shorts that tell you how to think about the river, right? And so the chances of it influencing someone, I think, are better than they would be otherwise.
Yes, I think that's true. I think that is true. And of course, affecting the younger people and affecting the collective as a whole is the best way to influence policy. in this particular historical moment, maybe in every historical moment, if you don't have a lot of money and a big bankroll and a big project that's going to do something amazing for the local government, it's very, very difficult to have effect in policy. But you can have effect, and I like what Alex said, that you can have effect on the minds of the young people who will grow up to be policy makers. There's the poor, that, as you say, Sean, the story is a very, very powerful medium. And there's a line from an anthropologist, Marilyn Strathern, and she says that the thoughts that we use to think other thoughts are the important ones. And so part of what your film seems to do is give us some new thoughts that we can all use to start thinking ourselves into the future, into that Mekong 2030.
Thanks for that. Yeah, that's
I
great.
love that, Courtney. That's
Isn't that nice?
what I've been looking for to explain about these films. So thank you.
You can use that too. It's Marilyn Strathern. That's not mine. Okay. Well, I think that we're out of questions and there's just a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that you guys want to tell the audience before we close this up? It's been so lovely.
Make your plans to come to Luang Prabang in December. Start planning now.
Excellent. Put it on the calendar. Alex?
I'd say if you can donate, the film festival does so many great things. I can't even explain. Join the newsletter and you'll hear about all the awesome things that we do. Sean, I already said I'm still a part of the WE for the film festival. I'm an honorary volunteer. And then, yeah, I mean, I had another thing that I wanted to say. I forget now. Oh, we're still trying to make sure that it's, as we mentioned before, the film has been on a really great 2-year film circuit. Still trying to figure out how to put it somewhere where it can be accessible to everyone at any time. But hopefully we'll get there soon. And thank you. Thank you for having us. This was great.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you very much, Courtney.
That is excellent. Thank you both very much. It was a really lovely talk. It's such an amazing film. If any of you haven't watched the film, please do so and donate to the film festival and show up in Luang Prabang. And best of luck to you both. It was such a delight to talk with you.
Thanks so much.